Transport Part 2 ICSE, we go through the Indian Railways. We now go to the railways in India, the second mode of transportation. A few interesting facts. Largest network in the world. Daily 14,000 trains and 11 million passengers. 7,500 railway stations. 7,800 locomotives. 40,000 coaches. Employs 1.6 million people and therefore is the largest employer in the world. The railways constitute the principal mode of transportation for freight and passengers. It brings together people from the furthest corners of the country for conducting business, sightseeing, pilgrimage, education, etc. The railways were introduced to India in 1853 when a line was constructed from Mumbai to Thane, covering a distance of 34 kilometers. In 1951, the systems were nationalized as one unit, becoming one of the largest networks in the world. Indian Railways operate both long distance and suburban railway systems. Many cities have their own suburban networks to cater to commuters. Currently, suburban networks operate in Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, Delhi, Hyderabad, Pune, and Lucknow. The last three cities do not have suburban track but share the track with long distance trains. New Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, and Mumbai have their own metro networks. Suburban trains that handle commuter traffic are mostly electric multiple units (EMUs). They have usually 9 coaches, sometimes 12, and now even 15 to handle rush hour traffic. Now let's take a look at the different gauges used in the railways in India. We basically have three: broad gauge, meter gauge, and narrow gauge. And the name says it all. Narrow gauge, the space between the tracks, 0.76 to 0.61 meters. Meter gauge, as I said, the name says it all, 1 meter. Broad gauge, 1.67 meters. Usually we find the narrow gauge lines in hilly regions. Meter gauge around India, usually diesel engines go on meter gauge. And broad gauge, we are now going more towards broad gauge electrification, electrified engines. A recap on gauges with a little more information. Broad gauge, meter gauge, and narrow gauge come under the track system. It is based on the width of the track. The Indian railways are divided into three categories. Broad gauge, the distance between the rail is 1.676 meter. Almost all the main routes are broad gauge. Broad gauge system links major ports of India with the interior towns and industrial centers and handles 85% of all total good traffic in terms of tons kilometers. Broad gauge railway lines on the west coastal lowlands is known as the Konkan railway line is an engineering marvel of the Indian railways. It is 760-kilometer long rail route connecting Roha in Maharashtra to Mangalore in Karnataka. It crosses 146 rivers, streams, nearly 2,000 bridges and 91 tunnels. It also passes through 6.5-kilometer long tunnel, which is Asia's largest tunnel. The states of Maharashtra, Karnataka and Goa are partners in this project. Meter gauge, the distance between the rails is 1 meter. Narrow gauge, the distance between the rails is 0.762 meters and 0.6110 meters. It is mainly confined, as I told you earlier, to the hilly areas. If you take a look closely at this picture, you will see two gauges. The narrow gauge, as you can see there, and the broad gauge. This is a picture of a meter gauge. We go through this again. Broad gauge connects all major cities and ports, mostly electric engines, some diesel. Meter gauge connects major cities to smaller towns, mostly diesel engines. Narrow gauge connects places in hilly regions, thermal and diesel engines. As you can see, the tracks, they're very narrow. When we take a look at the distribution of railway network in India, the railway network is mostly dense in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. It is somewhat medium in the plateau region and quite scarce in hilly and desert areas. This is a list of the railways in India and where their headquarters lie. Northern Railway, New Delhi. Northeastern Railway, Gorakhpur. Northeastern Frontier Railway, Maligaon, Guwahati. Eastern Railway, Kolkata. Southeastern Railway, Kolkata. South Central Railway, Sikandrabad. Southern Railway, Chennai. Central Railway, Mumbai, Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus. Western Railway, Mumbai, Churchgate. South Western Railway, Hubli. North Western Railway, Jaipur. West Central Railway, Jabalpur. North Central Railway, Allahabad. Southeast Central Railway, Bilaspur. East Coast Railway, Bhubaneswar. East Central Railway, Hajipur. And Konkan Railway, Navi Mumbai. What are the advantages of railways? Cheap mode of transport, transportation of bulk goods over long distances, long and comfortable travel, can be used by many people at a time. What are the disadvantages of the railways? Rail transport is inflexible. They lack flexibility of routes. Train tracks cannot be laid in every region of the country, like in hilly areas or remote forested areas. Train travel can be long and tedious, especially when compared to air travel. Train travel definitely does not provide door-to-door service. More time and labor intensive in terms of booking of tickets and taking delivery of goods. What are the economic importance of railways? Railways facilitates trade, urbanization, agriculture and tourism. Railways provide employment and promote national integration. What are the current problems faced by Indian Railways? Tremendous pressure of traffic, unsafe due to poor maintenance, inefficient image of railways, obsolete machineries, track and equipment, heavy consumption of electricity, unskilled and untrained workforce. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe.